We'll call this regular city council meeting to order on Monday, November 4th, 2019 at 7 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Present.
Mr. Bateman?
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Present.
Mr. Welch?
Present.
Mr. Parrott?
Present.
Mr. Downs?
Present.
Mr. Keller?
Present.
Mr. Haneke?
Present.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a real quick reminder to make sure everybody speaks into their microphones. We had some concerns last week. Under public participation, Wanda Lee.
I would like to address the information on the bond. I apologize, I was not here in the state when you did the the hearing, public hearing. So there may be some information that I asked that you have already given, but I would like to get those answers. I didn't find anything in the minutes that particularly gave me the answers to this. Now, with this particular limited tax bond, it does mean that the city has to come up with money, and from what the agenda says, that will be a tax levy?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, Mrs. Rolfs, that would be the tax levy. The amount of that levy would be set by whatever the rate is at the time bonds are issued, which we would anticipate being in December of this year. So we're there'll be a window there, which the time the bond underwriter can do that. And what they try to do is get it when they think it's going to be the lowest. But yes, that would be determined by the levy. Currently, there was a bond issued in January of 2017. It was intended to be December of 2016, but it ended up being January of the following year. That final payment on that bond will be December 1st. So that'll have been paid off. That bond issue, and then this would replace that. So this would be a levy that would replace that levy, that it would not be in addition to the levy.
Okay. And we will not have any choice in what that levy amount might be. Once they say, are we obligated, once they say this is the levy amount, are we obligated to go ahead with that?
It's fixed based on the interest rate. What we would aim to do would be for the first year, assuming that it's going to be about 2.5%, somewhere there, we would try to, for the first year, make that level with what it was last year, or very close to what it was last year, and then make up any difference in succeeding years. It's also possible that currently, bond rates are pretty low, so it's possible it could even go down.
Okay.
And it's possible it could go up a little. We're not anticipating, that it's going to be radically different.
And how long will we be paying that one?
3 years, just as we've done in the past. And I think we did this. I know we did when you were on the city council, and prior to that, and I don't know how many years before that. We have done this every 3 years. But in each of these cases, this is much different than the alternate revenue bonds, but with the general obligation bonds, the levies for those have replaced the levy for the previous ones that were issued in 3-year increments.
Okay, and then in the second whereas, in the statements, it said that the council had determined and does hereby determine that it is necessary, essential, and in the best interest of the residents of the city to borrow at this time the sum of an amount not to exceed the $500,000 to be used to finance certain capital expenditures in and or the city. And it says the project. Do we know what the project is?
We don't have any specific. I mean, we know that we're going to need some money for Fifth Street Road project. That would be one of the possibilities. We also know there are going to be other software upgrades that we're going to need, and that would be, some of the other things. But that hasn't been really nailed down yet.
It hasn't been determined what the project would be.
Right. We know those are two of the things.
I'm sorry, Chuck. excuse me, Treasurer,
That's okay.
what was the first thing you said?
Well, that, we know the Fifth Street Road project
Street.
will be part of that. It could be used in part for that. It could also be used in what I like to call stuff that breaks, which is just about any piece of equipment that we have, and we've used it in the past for unexpected things that broke.
When you're looking at this bond, and since we have some specifics of the ordinance that are not in black and white, it's kind of like vague as to what the percentage will be and what we're going to use it for. Is that announced at a city council meeting, that this particular,
Well,
so that we know?
Yeah, what we do with the payment of bills, we would, it would be specified under that. This bond number will be, the fund number will be 43. There's nothing currently in that because we haven't issued the bond yet. And there would be bond expenditures, and they'd be spelled out in the expense report that the accounts payable department issues.
Now, does that come up under the consent agenda, so we might not know for sure? Or is it,
Well,
will it be
yeah,
itemized?
if it's a large expenditure, it would be, it would require council approval, just like they do with any fund. If you're going to spend, $50,000 to buy a truck, or you're going to buy something that's a substantial amount, generally, I mean, if it's over 20,000, that's always, it's always the case, and sometimes less than that. So any project, anything that could be defined as a project or a major expense would require pre-approval from the council. It couldn't just be included in the payment of bills. But
So is there, I know one time there was like a $20,000 limit.
yes, and that's still the case.
Is that still the case?
Right.
Otherwise, you have to get permission of the council to
In
spend
advance
that.
of spending it, yeah. You couldn't just list it in the payment of bills like you could with a lesser amount. So, yeah, anything like that would have to be,
And that would
would require prior approval from the council.
And that would then be, it would be basically said that this is applicable to this
Bond.
2020
Yeah,
bond.
right,
Okay.
right.
Thank you. Did you cover that in?
Not all of that. We covered a little of it, but we covered it in general terms, let's say.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak under public participation? Okay, moving down to the consent agenda, we have the payment of bills, approval of minutes October 21st, 2019 regular city council meeting, and October 29th, 2019 committee of the whole meeting. Request from LCHS to permit the display of banners to promote the annual Madrigal Dinner on various sites from November 5th, 2019 through November 26th, 2019, as well as the approval of requests from the Logan County Tourism Bureau for a sponsorship in the amount of $500 for the annual Christmas parade to assist in the payment of Santa's sleigh.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion, Mr. Keller seconded. Discussion? Oh, Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there were some questions last week about the actual placement of the banners. Am I correct? What did we find out about that?
Someone suggested about hanging them. Was that you that, was it Steve?
I didn't know how they were going to do it. I just made it kind of a little bit of an assumption.
Well, I asked, they can be hung, the lady said, but Walt said that those poles that used to hang across, those poles aren't there no more, so he can't hang it there. But the Welcome Park was suggested by her, and then Walt suggested maybe out further at Tourism, not up by Tourism Door, but out by the, closer to the tracks, so people coming and going in and could see it. Those were the two places.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion? Tracy?
So if those locations are associated with tourism, I think we can approve this tonight to do this, but I do think we need to speak with Nyla and Morgan down at Tourism and have them run it by the board, just for awareness.
I asked Morgan the day after, and she says, well, she didn't see any problem with it. She says it's probably the size of the same size banner that when they have the bands in the Latham Park has. She didn't feel there was an issue.
Okay.
Anything further? Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Parrott,
Yes.
Mr. Downs.
Yes.
Under ordinance and resolution, we have the ordinance providing for the issue of an amount not to exceed $500,000 general obligation bond, Series 2019, the City of Lincoln, Logan County, Illinois, and for the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest on said bonds.
Move to approve. Second.
Kathy Horn made the motion. Kathy Schmidt seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Parrott,
Yes.
Mr. Downs,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mr. Honecke,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Under new business, oh, I'm sorry, back up there. Under ordinance designating a zoning setback of 250 feet from schools and churches for retail marijuana dispensaries.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Keller made the motion. Mr. Welch seconded. Discussion? Sam?
I'd like to see that drop down. I think that that marijuana is no more dangerous than alcohol, and if we already have 100 feet for alcohol, I think we should have the same for marijuana.
You making a motion for that then?
Sure.
I'll second it.
To what distance?
100.
Match the liquor.
Yes.
So we have to have to pull the other, correct?
No, you would vote on this, and if it passes, then you would vote on the original motion as amended. If this doesn't pass, then it goes back to the original 250 feet.
Okay, so is there just a discussion on the 100 feet? Kevin?
I agree with Sam. We have 100 feet for alcohol. I agree that's no different. And even the mayor made the comment the other day that, nobody's forcing you to go into these places. It is a very tight area. It would open up more properties. But I agree that it's no different than the alcohol, so I think we should mirror the alcohol ordinance.
Kathy Schmidt?
I disagree, and I think that it is, as Mr. Parrott spoke last week, it is treated differently in the state, so I disagree. I think it should be at least 250 feet from schools and churches.
Steve?
I said it last week, and I'll just agree again with Catherine.
John?
If it don't pass, it goes to the original 250.
Any further discussion on that? Okay, roll call.
So this is on the 100?
Yeah, on the 100.
And Sam made the motion and Kevin seconded?
Yes.
Yes, it's the correct way. This is 100, again, to clarify, just so everyone's on the same page, it's 100 feet for both schools and churches. Okay, but yes, we would be voting on this particular juncture first.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
No.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
No.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Honecke?
No.
Mrs. Horn?
No.
I already voiced my opinion last time, so I'm going to say yes.
So now,
So make the motion to set the ordinance at 100 feet as amended.
Mr. Hamlet?
You guys already effectively, really, with the previous vote, you really already effectively voted. You voted for the amended motion pretty much already at this juncture. So I don't, as to how you wish to proceed at this point, but I mean, I don't think there needs to be another vote, but You voted on the amendment, yes, but go ahead and vote on your as amended vote now for the exact same thing. It's no longer in play. You voted for an amended version of that motion. So why would you vote for the 250 at that point?
But they had made a motion, but they don't have to.
I still have open motions on the table for that first one.
So,
It passed amended, so the original 250 is no longer in play since it passed as amended. The next vote, procedurally, the way I'm used to it, is now we're just voting on the amendment, on the motion as amended. However the city attorney would like to handle it.
I think John's saying it's not needed.
you already voted for the amended motion. You know, you voted for the amendment, it passed. You know, it's the exact same thing.
Okay. So at this point, then, we're moving down the new business communications. Okay. So under new business and communications, we have the approval of an agreement for professional services between Crawford Murphy and Tilly Incorporated and the City of Lincoln for the release of the termination of boundaries at the wastewater treatment plant.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff made the motion, Kevin seconded. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn? Yes.
Approval of request for proposal for the purchase and installation of solar panel system at the sewage treatment plant.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Tracy made the motion, Kevin seconded. Kevin?
So this, again, this is just a motion to go out for proposal on installing solar panels at the sewer treatment plant. We're not installing anything, we're just approving an RFP to find out what it's gonna cost and whether it's feasible and those kind of things.
Just to verify, so who's doing that and when are they doing that?
Viola would take care of it. They've done it before at the other plants that they have that has solar panels, so they would, I'm assuming it's still okay that they would send the proposals out and.
Yeah, we discussed that, and we sent an email back to Peggy, Elizabeth today regarding, we have contractors, there's only 6 in the state that can be approved for this. We're gonna send them out to those, but we do still recommend that you at least advertise it in your newspaper and, of course, on your site. This way, if anybody else is interested, but we will definitely take care of the paperwork as far as, getting it out to them. And then, all we want to do is if they're gonna send it back to you, we just would like it recorded on who actually wants to put in a proposal.
I didn't hear the last part of that.
Yeah, all we need to do is what they're going to do is send it back to the city, since it's the city's proposal. All we need for you to do is make sure that you write down who actually sent back those bids so that we can then go to the next step to get them in to discuss.
Further discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn? Yes.
Approval of printer maintenance and lease cartridges contract for the City Administrator's Office between the City of Lincoln and Conica Minolta for 3 years in an amount not to exceed $1,260.
Move to approve.
Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Kathy Horn made the motion. Mr. Parrott seconded. Discussion. Beth?
Well, yes, I don't know how you're going to vote on this. It didn't seem like it was that much of a discussion, but since we already have Minolta copiers throughout the city, they're giving us a deal on this for $35 a month for them to do maintenance, as well as provide all of my colored cartridges and my black cartridges. The cartridges are average about $100 a piece, but they are right now a little bit on sale. Some of them are about $89, I think. So we can go back to what we're doing. No matter how I figured this out, it still comes out the same amount per copy. So, but it will be a big savings if we would go with this $35. I do have a spending authority of $20,000, but since this is a contract, I felt the city of Lincoln needed to approve it.
Kevin?
So most big companies have contracts like this. I know the one I work for does. There's no documents in here that go in detail of the contract, and my fear is most of these kind of contracts have a not to exceed so many pages, and then it becomes almost more expensive than the original. So I have a tough time voting for it without the particulars in the contract. And if we can get some kind of average of what we're using copy-wise to see if we're close to overstepping those bounds or if we're not that far away, those are my concerns.
Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in looking at the agreement here, I noticed it says customer approval, et cetera, and it says signature below acknowledges customer consent to terms and agreement Schedule A, updated December 1st, 2018, hard copy upon request. But there's no Schedule A with it, which means somebody didn't send it for some reason, but whoever drew this up on behalf of Conica for some reason didn't submit that, I'm assuming. But there's no Schedule A with it, so it's not up to me to vote on it, but I wouldn't vote on something that I didn't see the entire document.
Beth?
Yes, the gentleman that took over for Caroline Higgins has left the company, and so they were honoring what he had come up with, and that was a $35 per month fee. And as far as I understood it, it was unlimited copies. That's why this was kind of a no-brainer for approval. But if you want me to go back and do some more research, I will. But I didn't see a Schedule A, but there might have been one, so I can go
I
look.
would guess they probably didn't submit it.
Possibly, and they were kind of in flux here with him leaving and not letting people know till the last minute, and then this new lady, so they were honoring what we had.
It's like a cable contract.
Mr. Welch?
I think one of the things that I'd like to know is if we can get out of the contract, if we get into it at $35 a month, and then we find out that they start charging us for number of copies over a certain quantity. But I did do some brief research on this program. It's called the One Rate program, and I didn't see any negative feedback or anything that indicated that we should steer clear of it. So if there's a opt-out clause in it in the contract, that's worth considering going forward.
Discussion or questions? Mr. Bateman?
So is the consensus that we table this until we get some more documentation or come up with some kind of average of how many copies we're going through a month? I mean, again, I can only speak on my behalf. We have an actual counter on our printer that, it keeps track so that you know not to go over, because once you go over it, then it's kind of like the compounded interest thing on a credit card.
I use a similar service from HP at home, and my printer actually communicates with HP. And so if I'm getting near my threshold, they send me an email. I don't know if that's how this works, but, and I know it's hard to believe that you could have unlimited printing for $35, but some of the pages that I referenced when I was looking led us to believe that they're kind of going out on a limb with programs like this to be more competitive. So again, I still am in favor of seeing the contract, but just a little bit more reference.
Okay, so we have someone that wants to remove their, correct?
So Steve would have to.
Steve and Kathy.
I'll rescind my second.
Rescind my first.
Motion to table this?
Make a motion to table.
Second it.
All right, Mr. Bain made the motion to table. Kathy Schmidt seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Honecke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn? Yes. Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Do we have any announcements? Mr. Welch?
Make a motion to go into executive session under 2C1 personnel and 2C11 litigation.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mr. Keller seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Oh, yes.
Mr. Honecke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn? Yes. Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
7:27, we will go into executive session. There will not be any future city business. Thank you.
What are they doing? You're talking about a temporary. Yeah, you were saying.
I was la la land for just a second there.
I guess what I was talking about.